British concert pianist Paul Lewis is one of the leading pianists of his generation. He's won many awards and accolades worldwide for his playing and recordings. And he's the first pianist in the history of the BBC Proms to have performed all 5 Beethoven piano concertos in one Proms season. And I'm thrilled he's joining me today for a classical conversation. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you.
I know you're so busy, so thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for coming.
And I'm just going to start by asking all about your musical education. What age were you when you started? What was the catalyst? And do you come from a musical family?
There was no music at home when I was little, really, apart from what was on the radio. My dad at the time was a big John Denver fan. He had some John Denver records, well, probably all the John Denver records. But apart from that, there was really nothing musical in the house. There was a great, well-stocked record library around the corner from where we lived.
Right.
And I remember I joined the record library when I was about 8, and that's where I got to know lots of music. It was such an important, fundamental part of my musical upbringing, really. Right. So I could just sort of discover music freely, and every weekend I'd take out three records, tape them. I still have some of the tapes. Don't have a cassette player, but the tapes are there. And that's how I got to know music, really.
That's amazing, isn't it? Not to have a musical background in that way. But it's...
Well, I mean, I know a lot of musicians do have
yes.
Musical parents, a musical background of some sort, but I'm quite grateful that I didn't, in a way, because I could discover it in my own way. I wasn't sort of steered in any particular direction. Mum and Dad were always very supportive, but of course they didn't know about music, so it was up to me to find it, really, and I'm quite glad I could have the opportunity to do that.
So when did you first start playing the piano? How old were you?
Well, I suppose it goes back to when I was 4. An aunt, a great aunt, bought me a little Bontempi organ toy sort of thing.
Remember those?
Yeah. I think it was a very basic model. It didn't even have a demo on it. You just had to do it all yourself. But yeah, that was when I was 4, and I remember it had 15 notes on it, so an octave and a bit. And I started sort of picking out tunes and started from there, really. I don't know, it didn't seem... I remember, I do vaguely remember Mum and Dad's surprise when I just started to play tunes that they recognised. I didn't think there was anything strange about it. I remember being puzzled by their reaction more than anything else. But it was it was a toy. It was just fun, really. So I suppose that really is my first encounter with a keyboard.
So which teacher then do you think was crucial in the development of your piano playing?
Well, when I went to Guildhall when I was 18, I studied with Joan Havel for the next 5 years, and that felt very important to me, pianistically, mainly, really, just to have this very solid and intense kind of grounding with the piano. Because I felt I needed it at that stage, really. I felt that it's difficult to describe. I felt a little bit disconnected physically from the keyboard, or that I wanted to do certain things that I wasn't able to do.
Yes.
I didn't feel particularly secure at the keyboard, and I think those years with Joan really helped me a lot in that respect. She has a very good understanding of how it works physically and how you connect yourself to the keyboard and to do it in a relatively relaxed way, because we all try to be relaxed when we play. It's easier said than done, and of course we have to use our muscles. It's not like we can just be floppy, but how to manage all that is the question, and she was great. She was great at that.
And so how did you develop your technique over the years?
Well, I don't know. I think you carry on developing it. I don't think you ever stop.
That's interesting. A lot of the pianists I've interviewed have said that. They feel
Really?
even now they're still developing in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 40 now, and
Just a young chap.
well, getting on. And there are things, say pieces that I'm playing now that I'm coming back to after 10 years. So I played them when I was 30 the last time. There are things that I found more difficult then than I do now.
That's interesting.
And it's only up here, really. There's nothing physical that's changed dramatically, at least in that time. At least I don't think so. But it's just the way you think of things. And I think sometimes we get hung up on technique, that we look for physical ways around things, when in fact we should ask ourselves the question, what is it musically that we're trying to achieve? And usually that there's something that presents itself through that route. You hit on something that you find is actually more like the answer than if you were kind of banging on about, well, how am I going to get around this?
Yes, that's true actually. So you studied privately with Alfred Brendel, which must have been an amazing experience. How do you think this influenced your piano playing and your thoughts on music generally?
Well, it was an amazing experience. It was very, very intense. I do remember the first time. Well, the first time I played to him was in '93 at a masterclass at the Guildhall. I played the Haydn E-flat Sonata. So that was already more than 20 years ago. It was amazing. And then after that, I would go to his home in Hampstead and maybe 5 or 6 times a year play something. The first time I went there was later that year, and I played the Dante Sonata, Liszt Dante Sonata, which was a piece that I played it at school, and I'd been playing it for a while and thought I knew it, and came out of that lesson and realised I didn't know it at all.
It's funny, I've heard him play that many times, and it's a piece I used to play as well, and it's incredible, his reading of that. That sonata is just unbelievable. I've got a memory of that piece.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible how detailed it gets, really, in terms of sound and colour. And I think when I played it to him, I was perhaps thinking more along the lines of sort of a general pianistic way of playing, which of course is a way to do it, but Liszt, I think, benefits a lot from a different kind of approach. You don't just look at it from a pianistic way, because it can sometimes fall down if you do. It became an orchestral piece. After I played it to him. I mean, in my mind, it changed like that. But the intensity of that session, that first session on it, was such that I got home and I couldn't play it. I couldn't even play the notes. It took quite a while before I could come back to it and rework everything. Look at everything from a different point of view and actually manage to do it physically at the same time. It was quite a sort of devastating effect in a way.
And which composers are you particularly drawn to? You really enjoy playing?
Well, I play a lot of the sort of Germanic classical music, Beethoven, Schubert, Mozart, etc. And along that line. But it's not just that. It's really, I think the composers I'm most drawn to these days are those that are less pianistic in their writing. I mean, Liszt obviously is very pianistic, but as we just talked about, it's not really piano music. It's bigger than that. It's orchestral music. I mean, Schubert, there's such a lot of vocal music in Schubert, quite obviously, and I think to have music that you can try to use the piano. To imitate other things, I think is it's great fun. It's a great challenge, and it's just a lot more interesting, I find, than certain other types of music, which really do rely on the piano sounding like a piano in a sense. I find that sort of music I just get not bored with, because it can still be great music, but it just doesn't appeal to me in the same way, really.
Okay. Well, I mentioned in the intro that you've played all 5 Beethoven piano concertos in one go at the Proms. They're all very different, aren't they? They've got different characters. So which one do you prefer playing, and why?
That depends on which conductor and which orchestra I'm playing with.
The music.
Yeah. Well, the fourth is for me the biggest challenge. It's the most subtle of the 5. I find. It's the most difficult. It's difficult to play it in a very subtle way. It doesn't necessarily sound as if it's the most impressive in the way that the 3rd or the 5th might sound, but its difficulties are often hidden to the ear.
Yes.
Doesn't lie particularly well under the fingers, and there are a lot of very subtle changes of temperature, little changes of pulse and colour along the way, and you have to see eye to eye with whoever you're doing it with for that to work. And when it does, it feels like nothing else. A performance of the 4th that you felt was really in the zone. It's quite something. Whereas, but on the other hand, it's also susceptible to the opposite. Really, if it doesn't work, it's a disaster and it just feels terrible.
That's interesting. Yeah.
So, in a way, the 4th, I suppose, is my favourite, but because it's the most fragile and elusive of the 5.
Well, your recordings of the all 32 Beethoven piano sonatas have been really critically acclaimed. How does your approach differ in interpretation from, say, the early sonatas to the last 6, do you think?
I think, my approach probably doesn't change too much, because I think what you're doing is you're just trying to unearth what it is that Beethoven's getting at, and obviously the language. If you compare the early sonatas to the late, the language is very different. The musical language, the sound is different. I mean, it's a world of difference, really. But what you're trying to do is to convey what it is you think Beethoven is telling you, and in that sense, the approach is the same. Okay. It's just that he becomes. There's the language, and he becomes a lot more prescriptive in the later sonatas, a lot more detailed in his markings, and I think in that sense, you could say that the late sonatas sound as if they ought to sound as if they have a kind of freedom about them, in performance. But in fact, when you look at the score, you have less freedom than you do in the early sonatas, because he's so specific about what he wants. So that's a big challenge, I think, with the late sonatas, because they do have to sound really unrestrained, unshackled, and that's something which I suppose does require a slightly different approach, but essentially you're still approaching it in the same way.
In 2011, you embarked on a very interesting project, playing and recording all of Schubert's mature works written in the last 6 years of his life. This is quite an interesting project. How did it come about, and where can we hear you playing them?
Well, it came about because Schubert is one of those composers I can't live without, really. I have to have Schubert around, or not too far away. It's something I've wanted to do. Well, in fact, 10 years ago, it was like more than 10 years ago now, I played all the completed piano sonatas in the 2001-2002 season. And it was the first time I'd ever done anything like that, any kind of series.
Right.
And I just thought, well, I had great fun with it, and wanted to come back to Schubert in a slightly more comprehensive way. So all the mature piano music, the last 6 years of his life, was something that I had in mind for some time. It's now coming to the end of that time. So all the venues that have taken the whole series have had the last concert. But I'm just playing the last program until this summer.
So you're recording those, or?
Yeah, most of it's done
right
now. I think that the last CD will be out in the spring of next year. In fact, I've re-recorded. The very first CD I made was Schubert. It was the C minor and the A minor Deutsch 7/8/4 sonatas, and I've just re-recorded those two. So I think that'll be coming out too, because actually, 10, 11, 12 years is enough time for things to change drastically. Yeah.
Excellent. So tell us a little bit about the festival. I think it's called Midsummer Music that you run here in Buckinghamshire with your wife. How did that come about?
Well, we just wanted to start something, really. We live in a place that's not far from London, so there's no sort of great need for putting more music on. Everything is within easy reach, but we couldn't resist it. And there's a wonderful little place 10 minutes away from here, a little village called Latimer, which is, when you're there, you could be in the middle of nowhere. You're in this typical Chiltern landscape that you look out on. But in fact, you're 5 minutes drive away from the penultimate stop on the Metropolitan line. So it's quite accessible. So it's a weekend of concerts. We put on 4 concerts. We get a group of nice musicians together, and we just mix and match and play some concerts. Play 4 concerts.
That's a great idea, isn't it?
Yeah, and everybody seems to enjoy it. It's very friendly. We don't have critics. We don't have microphones. It's really just. Hopefully a situation where people can feel relaxed and enjoy playing music in a way that we all enjoy playing it, but certain situations are more pressured than others, and I wanted this to be a very unpressured situation in which to play.
Sounds lovely. So which venues around the world have you most enjoyed performing in?
Well, lots of different venues for different reasons, really. It's very difficult to just point to one or two, because they're all so different.
Sure.
I mean, there are not many. There are just a handful of venues where you kind of have an allergic reaction, or something doesn't feel right about it, about the sound. And I suppose it's a personal thing, because you have your own sound. You're looking for certain things when you play, obviously, and the sound of a hall, the acoustic of a hall, and the sound of a particular piano within that hall is, of course, a very important factor in how you get to that. And if those things are not if they're not right, if they're not kind of in line with what or not helpful, not helping you to find what you're looking for, then you can find it difficult. So it's not necessarily, a hall that everybody would dislike, but it's just something that doesn't fit for you. And then the halls that do are the places you really enjoy going back to.
Sure.
So yeah, I mean, in terms of, I think the Concertgebouw, the big hall of the Concertgebouw, is hard to beat, really. The acoustic in there is just so natural and colourful, and when I played a recital there last year, and you think, well, it's a big hall, it's a big symphony orchestra sized hall, but in fact it works so well. I mean, for a 2,000 seater plus, for a piano recital, I think it's, dare I say, it's the only 2,000 seater that really works fantastically well for solo piano, because everywhere else is a slight compromise.
Sure.
You're kind of battling with something. But I think the Concertgebouw is hard to beat. So
what's your most treasured musical memory over the years?
Oh, I really don't. I mean, there are too many. It's different looking back. I think when you're looking forward to something that you're about to do, you often look at it with a certain amount of trepidation or angst or terror.
Terror.
So, yeah, then you can look back at those same events and think, well, actually, I had quite a good time.
Even though there was terror.
Yeah, and I think the terror was part of the process in a way that
Sure.
made it possible. But Yeah, there are lots of. I mean, I think I'd find it very difficult to put my finger on one or two things. I've never been so stressed in all my life leading up to the Proms Beethoven cycle a few years ago.
Yes, yeah. Well, that's why I mentioned it, because it's such a feat, isn't it, really?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's, it was just, it really got to me in the months leading up to that.
Sure.
And I wondered, what have I agreed to, and what am I doing this for, really?
Yeah.
And then from the first rehearsal that we had, which was 2 days before the first concert, it all went. And it was clear that, okay, this that I've spent the last 3 years worrying about is now up and running. I can just enjoy it in a way. You lose some of that tension, and I had a great time. It was great fun. And then of course there's midsummer music. There's in a way it's the opposite end of the scale in terms of how high profile it is. But that I enjoy so much because it's homemade. It's our thing. It's with Björg, my wife. We put this thing together, and there's something very, very personal about it.
Sure.
And that is something that's very precious and I think unique.
So what exciting plans have you got coming up for the rest of the year?
Well, after these Schubert years, the next few years are a mixed bag. So the next recital program is with Mussorgsky, Pictures of an Exhibition, some late pieces of Liszt, Bach, Busoni, chorale preludes.
Quite different.
Yeah, very different, and great stuff. Great music, and but I think it's important to try to mix it up. You've spent some years doing almost exclusively one thing.
Sure.
To try to play as much diverse music as you can. There's the Brahms D minor concerto, which I've come to quite late. I played it for the first time just last month. Right. And that felt really daunting, doing a piece like that for the first time, and thinking, am I ever going to get this up and running? And then, I'm convinced it's part of the process. Really, it's part of what makes it possible. That all this angst that you feel when you lead up to something. Because those concerts I play when I'm really too relaxed on the day, they're never my best concerts. I have to have a certain amount of tension. Sure. And so anyway, I'm going off on a tangent here.
That's fine. No problem.
But with the Brahms, I was sort of worried about that, but it's such a great piece to play, and then once it's up and running. So after that, I decided to commit to the B flat, to the second, which I've never played before. Now that's going to be a challenge. I know I'm going to be unbearable to be around leading up to that.
So, what does playing the piano mean to you?
It's a difficult question, because primarily what we're involved in is music. We're having a life in music and spending our time experiencing music, and playing the piano is really a way to channel that. It's a way to convey to other people how you feel about all this. So it's a great privilege to be able to do that. And I often think about how it would feel if all of a sudden I couldn't play the piano for some reason. And I'm sure it would be a big deal not to be able to play the piano, because I'm used to doing that. But in the end, you still have music. You still, if fundamentally what is the most important thing is that you're surrounded by music. You can still be involved with music, and I'd like to think that was really. Of course, it is the most important thing. But if I were not able to play the piano, that it wouldn't be the end of the world, at least.
Thank you so much for joining me today, Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you.